I also wanted to discuss with you another set of like terrible views because as you know, Israel attacked the Hamas negotiation team in Doha in Qatar, and they essentially crossed the red line in that they attacked a major non-NATO ally. That's what Qatar is a NATO ally, and they attacked Doha mostly because they wanted to scuttle the negotiations. They literally attacked the negotiating team while they were discussing a ceasefire proposal. So when you do that, it's just that you really don't want a deal, right? So that's pretty obvious. But for the first time, like the Security Council of the United Nations issued a statement, not a resolution, a statement, so that the United States could finally condemn Israel. And they condemned the attack together with the rest of the Security Council without naming Israel, of course. Right? So it, that prompted a little bit of a crisis among Zionist circles that started to make the argument, make the case that actually this was completely legal. And so I wanted to look at the arguments of why this was legal that Zionists are making, to try and explain why this is just like terrible analysis. Or there's it's like killing a witness before they take the stand. Sort of. That's more like killing the journalists, but yeah, sort of. Um, so I wanted to run those arguments by you and like talk about them with you to show you just the level of disinformation out there is just mind-boggling. Like I've been having to read like Hilel Neuer and like Salo Eisenberg, and like it's just really bad analysis uh, in bad faith. It's just disinformation campaigns. So I wanted to look at them with you so that you are, I guess, better informed. So starting, no, this isn't Touch Housing. Starting with Hilel Neuer here. Hilel Neuer, as you know, or you might not, is the president. I think it's the president of UN Watch, which is a group that targets the UN for alleged anti-Semitism. Um, and so I just wanted to show you how he's justifying Israel attacking an ally of the United States, um, and just apparently not care. So Hilel Neuer says, we are being told that the attack on the gathering of jihadi terrorist leaders in Qatar was a violation of international law. The opposite is true. Just to set out the legal argument here, okay? For a state to be able to use force in the territory of another state, there needs to be one of three circumstances. Number one, it has the authorization of the UN Security Council. Number two, it has the authorization of the host state. So Qatar says you can use force in my territory, Israel. And number three has to be acting in self-defense. What does acting in self-defense mean? It means that a state has launched an armed attack against that state. So Qatar would have needed to launch an armed attack against Israel, and Israel would be needing to defend against that armed attack. That is not the same as avenging an attack. This is why the Iran-Israel relationship is so complicated. If you shoot a missile, that missile explodes, and then you're not shooting a second missile, then you don't have a right to self-defense um, against the concluded attack. You might have a right to self-defense to prevent future attacks if you know that those attacks are coming. So like if you picture a war is a circumstance when you know that it doesn't matter how much you defend them yourself, the other party will continue to strike at you until they defeat you. So you know that more strikes are coming, definitely coming. So you might have a right to preempt those attacks as they are being planned. So that's why we conceive war as a situation where two states can, go at each other. But if it's just a spat, like you threw a missile and that's it, no, the attack is done. There's no more self-defense. There are other mechanisms at your disposal. Go to the Security Council, for example. Right? There's a lot of debate out there about whether a non-state armed group can trigger the right of self-defense. And we're going to discuss this in the context of Hilel Neuer's argument. I don't subscribe to it. Like most of the global South does not subscribe to it. The majority of states in the world doesn't subscribe to it. This is an argument that um, some few Western states, including Israel, have advanced to justify their sort of kind of imperial logics of deploying force worldwide. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. But so let's look at the disinformation essentially. Now that you know the legal standard, right? It needs to be self-defense, consent, or UN Security Council authorization. Now let's look at the disinformation. He says, Hilel Neuer says, Article 51, self-defense. Under the UN Charter, Israel has an inherent right to self-defense against Hamas, which from the get-go, okay, from the get-go, no, it doesn't, because the right to self-defense is against states. Like, let me see if I can find the wall opinion. Hold on. This is the ICJ's wall opinion related to Israel. Okay, it related to whether Israel had a right under the law of self-defense to construct a wall around the West Bank. Can you read it? I think you can read it now. So it says, under the terms of Article 51, it's the same Article 51 that Hilel Neuer is talking about right here. So under Article 51, self-defense, Israel has an inherent right of self-defense against Hamas. Okay, it says, under the terms of Article 51 of the UN Charter, nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations until the Security Council has taken measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. So far, sure, inherent right. Article 51 of the Charter thus recognizes the existence of an inherent right of self-defense in the case of armed attack by one state against another. Right? So, under the UN Charter, Israel has an inherent right of self-defense against Hamas. Hamas is not a state. Therefore, no, it doesn't have a right to self-defense against Hamas. It says here, the court continues, however, Israel does, this is the ICJ, right? However, Israel does not claim that the attacks against it are imputable to a foreign state, right? The court also notes that Israel exercises control in the occupied Palestinian territory and that Israel itself states that the threat which it regards as justifying the construction of the wall originates within and not outside that territory. So it's occupied land, right? Consequently, the court concludes that Article 51 of the Charter has no relevance in this case. It's very clear. So the first sentence is already wrong. Under the UN Charter, Israel does not have an inherent right to self-defense against Hamas. It has an inherent right of self-defense against other states, but not against Hamas. Which, it says, which invaded Israel on October 7th, massacred 1,200 of its people, and still continues armed attack, rocket fire, and murderous terrorist attacks like the one yesterday at a Jerusalem bus stop that killed 6 and injured a dozen more. Yes, this is called terrorism, and it is handled through law enforcement. Or if you are talking about rocket fire, it's handled through the Iron Dome. If you want to use force against Hamas in the territory of another state, you need Security Council authorization, consent of the host state, or be acting in self-defense against that state. In this case, therefore, they needed Qatar to allow them to carry out an operation within Qatari territory. Simple as that. Right? In terms of like rocket fire, yes, that's the Iron Dome. The court also says it around here somewhere. It says 141. The fact remains that Israel has to face numerous indiscriminate and deadly acts of violence against the civilian population. It has the right and indeed the duty to respond in order to protect life of its citizens. The measures taken are bound nonetheless to remain in conformity with applicable international law. So what the court is saying here is you can have an Iron Dome to protect your population. That doesn't mean that you get to attack other states. It doesn't mean that you get to deploy force in other states, whether it's Palestine or Qatar, right? So it says this right of self-defense against Hamas is not confined geographically to Gaza. It's a right that doesn't exist. It extends wherever Hamas leaders are directing hostilities. This is not true. The right to self-defense only allows a state to not violate the sovereignty of another one. So let's assume that, I don't know, Qatar authorizes Israel to use force in its territory. That means that, actually, no, that wouldn't be self-defense. Let's assume that, Qatar exerts control over Hamas, and the actions of Hamas are attributable to Qatar, and therefore Israel can actually then act in self-defense, right? That only means that it can violate Qatari sovereignty. It doesn't mean that it can target. It doesn't mean that the person that they are targeting is a valid target, right? So it would need to be the case that those Hamas negotiators have a continuous combat function in Hamas before they are lawful targets. It's two different sets of rules. Self-defense refers to sovereignty. Are you violating the sovereignty of Qatar? Once you determine that you are not violating the sovereignty of Qatar, then you get IHL, international humanitarian law, that says whether that individual is a valid target or not. So Qatar, unwilling or unable. International law recognizes that if a host state, here Qatar, is unwilling or unable to neutralize a non-state armed group attacking another state, the victim state may lawfully use proportionate force. This is a false statement because international law does not recognize that right. The US, Israel, I think Australia, I don't know who else, recognize this right. The G77 and the non-aligned movement object to this standard, specifically saying that. So the majority of the world says that this is not reflected in international law. So international law does not recognize the unwilling or unable standard. Only a few states want to change the set of rules that I told you before to recognize a so-called unwilling or unable test. So this is not true. Unwilling or unable is not part of international law. It is lege ferenda, the law as Hilel Neuer and the United States want it to be, not the law as it is. This is false. I think there is sufficient academic discussion to say that there are many academics in the global north that would like this to be the case and that think that it is the case, but I honestly don't think that you can meet the standard of opinio juris with so few states arguing that this is part of international law. So it says Qatar knowingly harbors Hamas leaders and allows them to operate freely, meeting the unwilling threshold. This is bad law because let's assume for a second that this is the case, okay? Israel is attacking Qatar, claiming that it is not acting in aggression of Qatar, only of Hamas. But what exactly keeps Qatar from saying, but I'm not unwilling or unable, the US told me to keep Hamas here, so you are actually violating the law, and so you are attacking me, therefore I will attack you in self-defense. The unwilling or unable test exists under the logic of the place I am bombing will not respond to me. That's it. That's the argument. Because if the other party can respond to you, then we would have a law that essentially leads us to war. It's a blank check to bomb other countries, and then the other country would say, you're attacking me, so therefore I'm the one acting in self-defense, and you end up having this two self-defenses going up against each other. Analogy to Bin Laden case, US and Pakistan. The US justified its operation in Abbottabad to kill Osama bin Laden on the basis of that Pakistan was unwilling or unable to act against bin Laden. I'm actually not sure that this is the case, but I haven't looked at the official, because I think what they argued was self-defense. I've not looked at the official reasons why, but I don't think it was unwilling or unable. I'm not entirely sure. Few states seriously challenged that reasoning, and major democracies hailed the killing of bin Laden. By the same logic, Israel is entitled to strike Hamas leaders in Qatar if Doha provides them safe haven. This is, again, not true. There were a lot of discussions among academics saying that killing bin Laden had actually been unlawful. Kevin John Heller, for example, who worked with me at Opinion Juris, he called it a war crime. So there was actually, this is something that bothers me, and this is why I used to do these like mapping state reactions arguments, so like charts with like what the world actually thinks of specific world events. Because when he says major democracies hailed the killing of bin Laden, few states seriously challenged that reasoning. What he means is, European states, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, maybe Japan, and that's it, didn't condemn the attack. But when you start looking, it's always the case that most states in the world don't like it when states, violate the sovereignty of other states. Necessity and proportionality. Israel's strike was narrowly tailored against leaders of a group waging war on Israeli civilians and torturing hostages for more than 700 days. This satisfies the requirements that force in self-defense be necessary, proportionate, and directed against the source of the threat, not the Qatari state itself. This again does not make sense, because necessity means that there's no other means of averting an armed attack. Necessity means that there's an attack coming your way, and you have no other means but to react on the spot to defend yourself. There's no self-defense. Like, okay, if someone stabs you in the shoulder, right, and you push them away and you run away, and then you go to your home, you sleep at night, you think, I should have done more than just punch him. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna go Liam Neeson on this person. I'm gonna like, I don't know. I'm gonna go search them. I'm gonna find them with my set of skills, and I'm gonna kill them. And then 2 days later, you arrive at this person and say, "Remember me? 2 days ago, you stabbed me. So now I'm going to, in self-defense, out of necessity, kill you." That's not self-defense. That's not necessary. That is not necessary. Now, if they are going to stab you, and you, in order not to be stabbed, punch them in the face, the knife falls, and then you stab them, that's self-defense. That's necessary. Shooting at will is not necessary. Shooting like, oh, they're meeting there, let's shoot them. That's not necessary. And also directed at the source of the threat, not the Qatari state itself. You bombed their territory. What do you mean? Precedent in state practice. Multiple states have invoked and acted upon the unwilling or unable test to strike terrorist actors across borders. Again, the US, Israel, I think, I don't know who else. Like, there's like a list of like 5 at most. Like, again, that's not the international community. It's like this meme of like, where do aliens land, and it's a picture of the Earth, and it's only Europe and the US. You know, that's the international community, right? No legitimate sovereignty shield for terror sanctuaries. A state that knowingly shelters and protects terrorist leaders forfeits the right to invoke sovereignty as an absolute shield against proportionate defensive action by the victim state. This does not exist. This is bonkers bad. This doesn't exist. No legitimate sovereignty shield for terror sanctuaries. A state that knowingly shelters and protects terrorist leaders forfeits the right to invoke sovereignty as an absolute shield against proportionate defensive action by the victim state. This is not true. This doesn't exist. There's not even a definition of terrorism under international law. This is a blatant lie. But even if it were the case, then I guess it means we can bomb Israel, because it absolutely shelters terrorists, settler terrorists, who live in settlements, but also go into Israel proper and collaborate with the army. So I guess we can all just attack Israel. This is insane. This is like really bad faith. This is terrible. Yeah, that's it. This argumentation here, this sort of like this is not really law. He's making this up. This is really bad. I don't even know what to say. Like, I am willing to accept that there are some scholars out there that believe that the unwilling or unable test exists. I will challenge their views. And I think they don't have any basis to argue this out of the ICJ case law and stuff. I think it's a really bad test. I can accept someone saying, I believe that this should be legal. I have less sympathy for someone saying this is legal, because I don't think that the test actually exists in actual international law. But if it were just that, at least he would be operating within the bounds of academia, right? There's an academic discussion about the unwilling or unable test. It's just an academic discussion where I would say most of the experts that write about use of force are very hesitant to conclude that this test is actually law. Like, I think Oliver Corten and Tom Ruiz and Kevin John Heller and Jutta Brunei and I don't know, all of them do not think that the unwilling or unable standard actually exists. So I think scholars would be very hesitant to make an argument on the unwilling or unable test. They might say it might be the case that it might be legal under unwilling or unable. But to talk about this with this level of confidence is sort of in bad faith. Um, and then when it finishes with like, oh, I'm just gonna make up stuff. I'm just gonna make it up. I need it, so I'm just gonna make up a rule that says that sovereignty waters down in the face of whoever I think is a terrorist. Ish. It's it's really frustrating um that international law is being polluted by arguments like this. We've run out of time. Basically, I had a video by Natasha Hausdorff basically saying the same thing. Um, and it's a pity just how influential these people have become because of Twitter. When really, again, this goes back to my comment in the beginning about academia being way too comfortable in the shadows. I just listed a bunch of people you've probably never heard of. Like you've probably never heard of Olivier Corten, of Tom Ruiz, of like Jutta Bernay, of I don't know, people that like should people that are very influential in academia about these topics. They just don't have exposure. Yeah. So anyway, this is all terrible, and I hate it.